Hello, everyone. Welcome to our event today entitled Apprenticeships During the Pandemic, Cross-National Lessons Learned in Germany and the US. We have a really terrific panel today, really excited to kick things off. Just before we get things going, a few reminders about housekeeping and things to keep in mind as we proceed through today's event. First off, the event is being recorded and the recording will be posted online after the event. If you'd like, you can hide captions or adjust settings with the live transcript button. All of the slides are posted online at urban.org in case you want to look at that as we go through or reflect back on that. All participants are muted right now. And throughout the session, please type your questions and comments into the Q&A box at any time. At the end of the session, we'll have time for audience Q&A, and we hope to go through some of those questions at that time with our panelists. And finally, at the end, we would encourage you to complete the survey at the end of the event to provide us with feedback. And throughout the event, at any time, if you'd like to engage with us on social media, you can use the hashtag #liveaturban. Great. And at this time, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our first panelist, Miriam Farnbauer, who is Project Director of the Skills Initiative. And she'll give a framing about both Germany and the US, and what we know about apprenticeship and what sort of occurred during the pandemic, just a quick framing. So I'll turn it over right now to Miriam Farnbauer.
Thank you, Diana. Yeah, the Skills Initiative is an effort that promotes apprenticeship based on the German dual education system in the US. And I would like to give a few framing remarks and background info to the audience about the German and US apprenticeship models and the differences that there are. So in Germany, 55% of graduates from general education, which is comparable to graduation from high school in the US, enter an apprenticeship program. So apprenticeship enjoys a good reputation. It is not only well known, it is one common way to enter the world of work, and it is regarded as a valuable career pathway. The approach in Germany is very formalized and standardized, and the model gains its strength through the collaboration of different stakeholders and their respective roles. We have business and industry. I mean, without them, we couldn't do apprenticeship. We have government, social partners, chambers of commerce and industry involved, as well as the educational institutions, mostly being vocational schools. And there's a broad-based acceptance of apprenticeship standards. So we have the training regulations that are the basis for every apprenticeship in Germany. The government gives those, and based on these, framework curricula are developed. And it's important to note that the business and industry involvement is really high. Like, they say what needs to be included in those curricula in order to make apprenticeship work for them. And those framework curricula are being taught at the business, and at the same time, there is a curriculum that is used at school that is aligned with those curricula for the businesses. So we always have two coordinated learning venues in Germany: the school that teaches the theory, and then the business that will apply what they learned in theory and teach it in practice to the students. Next slide, please. In the US, in comparison, a rather smaller share of the population enters an apprenticeship program. And apprenticeship is still often an unknown or new concept, and some employers might not be aware of the benefit that apprenticeship brings when they train a student or an apprentice specific to their company's needs, and also the loyalty that they build because the apprentices see how invested the employer is. They pay for their training, they pay a salary while they are trained at the employer, and they pay for the schooling, and it means a lot. Just to give you an example, in 2019, we almost had 25,000 registered apprenticeship programs here in the US. And those range from common to niche occupations that you might not even have heard of. There are a lot of customized approaches when it comes to the sequencing between classroom training, on-the-job learning, pay, and credentials. All of these are very structured in Germany, and they have to all follow the same model. So that's a big difference. And there are also different styles of assessment in the United States. We have the time-based approach, the competency-based approach, as well as the hybrid approach. Lastly, I want to mention the difference between the registered apprenticeship programs and the industry recognized apprenticeships, that are the latter one being shorter in time and basically leaving out the schooling part. And this flexibility is great and has a lot of advantages, but it also requires specialized expertise to navigate all these different processes that come with apprenticeships. There might be employers out there who want to do an apprenticeship, but do not even know where to start. Like, how does the registration with the Department of Labor work? There's a lot of paperwork. Which kind of assessment do they want to use? And for those questions, there are intermediaries who can help and lend support because they have specific workforce development knowledge and apprenticeship program expertise. And next, thank you. And then, as we all know, COVID-19 happened. Both countries, well, the world was facing the pandemic, and we still are. Both countries went into lockdowns. We had to deal with new challenges, remote learning, closed schools, closed businesses, new regulations on a national and state level, the internal regulations that businesses and schools had to come up with, followed by the new policies up on return to work in school. And I'm very excited to hear from our panelists how they had to pivot, what they did, how they adapted to the new situations, the lessons learned, and how they shifted to a new normal. Thank you very much, and I give it back to Diana.
Great. Thank you so much, Miriam. And at this point, I would like to welcome our panelists. Great. Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to introduce the names of our panelists, and then they'll each go through and give a little bit of a high-level preview of their organization and the strategies that they used during this pandemic period. So starting us off will be Stefan Dietl. He's the global head of vocational education at Festo Didactic. And after Stefan is Chun Mu, who is the director of Microsoft Apprenticeship Programs and a co-founder of the Microsoft Leap Apprenticeship Program. And then after Chun is Bruce Noble, who's the regional director of employment engagement for the energy, construction, and utilities sector in the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. So right now I'm going to hand it over to Stefan to do a bit of a preview about his work.
Yeah, thank you, Dana. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening from Germany. It's a pleasure for me to give you a short introduction about the global activities we have at Festo in field of dual education. Festo is a family-owned company with around 20,000 employees. We have several production centers around the globe, and we are faced with big challenges to find the right people with the right skills. So this is one of the main reasons to make big investments for apprenticeship programs to make us more independent from the labor market. Next slide, please. Here you can see all the countries and all the areas where we have training centers. Starting on the bottom on the left side, 2 factories in Germany, in Esslingen. There we have also the headquarters. There this year we had about 50 newcomers in different disciplines like electronic, mechatronic, in industrial mechanic, in software development, in data science, and what else. We have another big factory close to the border of France, and there this year we had 20 newcomers. It was very impressive when we started in 2010 with our first activities out of Germany. You can see it on the top right in China. In meanwhile, we have in China around 130 apprentices, because there we have also a big factory, and we see it's very difficult to get the right skilled people. We have also a training center established in India in 2018. So there we have now 18 newcomers. There we have a 2 years mechatronic program. So all in all, we have around nearly 40 apprentices now also in India. In Bulgaria, this is the next topic, the next scope, because we have a relocation. We transfer our production center a little bit out of Sofia, and we are afraid that we will lose people. And also we have a big demand in the future. In Hungary, we have around 20 newcomers. So this year we have in Hungary, although we started in 2019, around 60 apprentices in total. And it's also a long tradition that we have a dual education programs in Switzerland. There might come up the question, why does Festo invest such a huge amount into young people? Again, the answer is we want to make us more independent from the labor market. We can't wait until the government makes everything for us. We want to do our own business. We want to make to go our own way, and also to train our young people. This is also the reason why we promise our graduates in Germany after graduation a lifelong contract, an unlimited contract. Next slide, please. And then we had Friday, 13th March last year. We got internal news like home office wherever possible. The Chamber of Commerce gave some signals that the exams will be postponed. We got from the state government the information the schools might be closed as of Tuesday next week. And so we decided on a Friday in the afternoon that we will close the training center at least for the following week. Next, click please. You can click on. So we are faced with several challenges. How can we reach the apprentices? How can we teach them? How can we inform them? How can we go in contact with them? And frankly speaking, this made it very easy to convince our board managers that a week after the lockdown, we invested around 100,000 euro to give all apprentices their own laptop. So we see that the laptop, a notebook, is not only a privilege, it's more a tool. And we believe that the young people have to learn how to use a laptop, a notebook, not only for writing their weekly reports or what else. Next slide. And this is a survey from McKinsey. And there we can see different topics, how many people have to be reskilled due to the pandemic, how many are affected due to the digitalization. And we can be lucky, and this is what we are at Festo, that automation becomes obviously a very important topic in the future. And also you can see it in the bottom on the right side that a lot of STEM workers are needed in the future. So this is exactly why we want to take over our responsibility and train the people. And maybe we have the chance to introduce later on about Map Square, which is a dual program what we have also in Mason in Ohio in our factory. Thanks for listening.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Stefan, for sharing your best practices from Germany. Obviously, we have a lot to learn. Thank you, Diana, for having us today. It's wonderful to virtually meet all of you. And so my name is Chunlu. I'm currently leading Microsoft Leap Apprenticeship program. And as Diana mentioned, I had a great pleasure to co-found this program 6 years ago. A couple of things when we think about the apprenticeship, especially in the US, as Marian shared with us, compared to Germany, you know, our journey here in the United States still feel like a little bit earlier stage. When we think about the talent is everywhere, but opportunities are not equally distributed. And at the same time, talent in high demand from other corporations versus when we see the talent, untapped talent is everywhere, right? So there is an interesting dilemma there. At the same time, going through the digital transformation, technological employability skills are required in a few months versus a few years as we continue to see the fast pace of digital transformation. So with these things in mind, what we're trying to kind of really live our Microsoft mission, which is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Microsoft Leap Apprenticeship Program's mission is to really recruit, develop and upskill unconventional talent from all walks of life with a connection of employability in the tech industry worldwide. So overall, when we think about the Microsoft Leap Apprenticeship, the experience is really about come to learn, come to work with our professionals at Microsoft and transform their professional careers. If I think about the three typical talent pipelines getting into Microsoft Leap, the first one is the returning parents who have had STEM background 10 or 15 years ago before they paused their career to be a caregiver. Now they are ready to come back. The second category of the talent we are looking into, we call them career relaunchers. These type of talent, they typically don't have an engineering or computer science background, but they do have is a shared commitment and also the passion in technology. So what they do is they will typically they will work on some projects on their self-learning through LinkedIn Learning, GitHub, etc. before they apply for Microsoft Leap. And the third category of the candidates we are looking into is community college graduates. If you think about students graduate from community college, they usually have a 2-year associate degree in the relevant field, right? So these talent are a great approach for us to think about how we can complement and augment the typical university hires and industry hires. And then there are three apprenticeship offerings from Microsoft Leap Apprenticeship. The first one, as I talk about, is how we are going to recruit and upskill talent externally and to train them up for anywhere between 4 to 12 months and get them ready to interview for a full-time job at Microsoft. The second is the internal apprenticeship, where we are looking for developing a platform for our internal Microsoft employees to get trained up and get them ready for a more technical role. The third offering what we have is Microsoft Leap as a service, is how we can replicate some of the success we have for the last 6 years to really serve the need, not only for Microsoft, but also for Microsoft partners and in the ecosystem, just the general communities. And so those are the three offerings we have. From a geographic expansion perspective, we started 6 years ago, we started the first cohort of 8 apprentices in Redmond, Washington. Now we are expanding to North America, multiple countries in North America, Central America, South America, a couple of countries in Africa, and we are expanding to Asia and Australia as well. We definitely see how we can leverage the model to really serve our community needs in terms of upskilling and providing employability globally. And the pathways, obviously, starting from the software engineer and technical PM and all the way to the business and also the go-to-market disciplines. Given the pandemic, when everything started, what we feel it was super beneficial is for us to really have some best practices already established. Just because back in January 2020, when the snow hit state of Washington, which is a typical way of where we welcome January, and our apprenticeship team actually quickly turned the in-person training to 100% virtual because of the snow situation. And starting March, when the pandemic impacted globally, we're able to switch the entire learning to 100% virtual overnight. So with that, I would like to close in summary is that if we think about, the overall apprenticeship, the way how we think about redefine a talent, the way how we think about, what are the unique attributes they have, such as grit, resilience, perseverance, logical thinking, problem solving, etc., are absolutely required for every single professional, not only for today, but also for the future. So that's the beauty of apprenticeship. So let me hand it over to Bruce.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'm Bruce Noble. I work for the California Community College Chancellor's Office on an initiative directed towards outreach, generally by sectors. I'm in the energy construction sector. There are 9 other sectors, including health and manufacturing, transportation, business, entrepreneurship, hospitality, maybe a couple of others. Anyway, the California Community College system There's 115 colleges and there are about 75 different districts. I didn't get the data, but it's about 75 districts. Their annual budget is $3.5 billion for 2.1 million students. Including that 2.1 million students are about 95,000 apprentices in the state of California. And the state supports apprenticeship programs, traditional apprenticeship programs and non-traditional programs at about $50 million a year towards training support and some newer initiatives on non-traditional apprenticeship training. In California, most of the apprentice programs were held within the trades and managed or supervised by union apprenticeship councils. Challenges I think we've already talked about, that it has to do with access to students and students' access to information. The colleges did some interesting projects. They had to pivot very quickly. We got our COVID information, I think it was on March 20th. And the next week, everything was to be shut down. Most community college, particularly in the skills areas or in career and technical education areas, are instructor-led and in-person activities where the student works in the classroom to understand the philosophy or the academic piece of the instruction, and then goes into a lab and demonstrates or practices and demonstrates that. Of course, that went away, so they had to pivot. Faculty did a really admirable job on that pivot. Within about 6 weeks, most of the programs had been converted over to a virtual platform, oftentimes Canvas or Blackboard. And then some innovation came up. We got terrific response from other education providers, proprietary providers of for oftentimes free access to their online curriculum to augment the programs, simulation programs, and even virtual reality training that was made available to the students. I think that's about it for the introductions, and I'll turn it back over to Diana.
Great, thank you, Bruce. And actually, you sort of led in with your last response to my first question for the panelists. So maybe we can hear from Chun and Stefan about how did COVID-19 force you to make changes to apprenticeship programs? What were the big changes that you had to make?
So first of all, we learned what means to be flexible. We have learned what means to be agile. We have learned let's say the speed how we can change the training system, the way of training. We have learned new topics about Mbit, about Wi-Fi, and what else. We have learned and we could teach the apprentices in field of discipline to be on time. So there were so many topics what we have learned. Of course, the pandemic was a big challenge for all of us, but I see more positive topics in meanwhile. So we have learned, and we should make sure that we go on with that speed, and should be very open for new technology, of the new way to train, of the new content. So I'm very optimistic. So in my understanding, we have so many opportunities to learn.
Thank you, Stefan. To add on that, for us to really pause and ask ourselves some questions, right? It is really about adaptability, agility, and growth mindset, right? The way how I think about it is that how the question could be, how did COVID-19 actually challenge us for us to kind of make the changes about the apprenticeship model, right? So a couple of questions when we start going through the pandemic is, do we have the system and process to support the apprentices with virtual learning and apprenticeship? We've been very intentional moving away from leveraging the word remote to 100% virtual. right? Because remote, there is always to think about what's a comparison. Oh, we are at the headquarters and there is remote. So we oftentimes use the word virtual. And then another question to ask ourselves is, how's their digital well-being in the pandemic and now endemic, right? So what are the channels for us to listen in, understand, and connect with our apprentices? To understand what are the blockers, right? And how we can think differently about digital learning and virtual connections, right? So we starting using the words such as digital handshake, right? Just to kind of really mirror what is the in-person physical settings that we are giving into expanding our horizon to a virtual community globally. And then another question for us to think about is what kind of support can we provide to our managers and mentors in order for them to provide the best support to our apprentices? Because, you know, managers and mentors in the pandemic, they are wearing multiple hats. So how we can show empathy and support to them are also very critical for them to give back to our apprentices.
Thank you. Bruce, did you have anything you wanted to tag on to that?
No, not actually. I'm sorry. The challenges were significant, and I'm just amazed at the way that the instructional institutions, both the trades apprenticeship training programs and the career and technical education programs around the state, were able to adapt and keep going forward. Right now, it looks like most of the on a ratio as far as in-person training and remote training, it's probably 40% in person right now. They do have to, I mean, some of those skills you just have to practice. So it's about 40%. Looks like that will probably, I don't know, and relatively will last through this year. They're trying to gear up in the spring, but I suspect that they will, it'll be about the same. And then hopefully by next summer, we'll be able to schedule full-time. But you know, some other really interesting things that they've gone from 16-week semesters, oftentimes to 8-week semesters, to split the curriculum down, make it more compact, and get the students through sooner. There's a whole bunch of innovation that's really come out of this, and as bad as it's been, I think that the system's going to come out better on the backside than maybe it started in at.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. It's something that you each just touched upon in your responses, which is that there's a lot of optimism about where we are now compared to where we started, and that innovations are sort of this theme that runs throughout. So I'd like to sort of move to a question that I plan later, but you know, what innovations specifically did you develop during the pandemic for apprenticeship programs, and what's going to continue long after? And I know, Stefan, we had talked earlier about some of these innovations. I mean, some of the things that you've all employed are truly technologically innovative, particularly when you think about the advanced manufacturing environment. Do you want to go ahead and kick things off, and then maybe Chun can contribute as well?
Yeah, it's a very good point. First, we had to innovate the mindset because in Germany we are, I believe, well known for a big block of bureaucracy, and this was what we have to break through in that question, in that situation. So, in my understanding, I believe those kind of companies and those training managers and trainers who had the open mind, they were very quick in the adaptation of the new situation. And this was also a challenge for the apprentices as well as for us as a full-time trainer. And I should let you know that around 40 to 60% of the time of 3 to 3.5 years, the apprentices don't stay with us in the training center. They have an internal rotation program. So that means in Germany, we have around 300, 400 part-time trainers, the unit leaders, the mentors in the departments who train the apprentices. For them, it was also very challenging. And so we had to have a scope to the apprentices, in my case, to the full-time trainers and the 300, 400 part-time trainers as well, because for them, it was also a challenge to handle and to keep their apprentices busy, to take care of them. They were isolated at home, and so that I believe there we raised that it was developed a huge step in a new innovative mindset. What is possible if we have to do it? That was for me really, really fantastic to see. And of course, we had some ideation competition within the apprentices. So please make 1 minute a short movie about home office successful managing, for example. So we got so funny movies, and we made a competition, and I sponsored around 5 kilogram chocolate for the winners. So I was surprised how much I have to purchase, but that was really awesome. So we established a Teams channel with the apprentices. I was in contact with them. We have established like a pool of tasks, of projects. So whenever the apprentices weren't totally busy and couldn't be occupied by the part-time trainers, they always had the opportunity to go to in a project pool, innovation pool. I have learned so many things from the apprentices. I asked them, in Germany, the e-mobility is a very important topic for an attractive employer. But what does it mean for a 16-year-old lady or a 16-year-old boy? He has no money, he has no chance to get a Tesla. But maybe now we speak about perhaps we can offer them some e-scooter. So I made some surveys with the apprentices. This was really fantastic. And now we need, I believe, more time to let come through all the ideas and innovations. So this was also a fantastic time.
That's great. Chan, do you have anything to add on?
Stefan did a fantastic job already, summarizes so much, and definitely see your passion coming through. So thank you for sharing. And just two points for me is that, you know, as Stefan's talk about the mindset, right? Because technologies is continue to innovate, but technology is a tool to enable the way how we think about, how we support, how we enable. So I feel like it is very critical to help the entire, you know, organization to understand like what means virtual, what's going to happen after endemic, right? So it totally expand our horizon, the way how we think about learning, social learning, because the apprentices coming from unconventional background, they have their unique life, live experiences. At the same time, if they look around, they feel like, okay, well, I don't have a typical 4-year degree, so how I'm going to be, you know, thinking about being as strong, as excellent as other professionals. The way how we define right now about these apprentices, the way virtually have the connections with their mentors and managers, give them so much confidence in the way to really understand how they can navigate through the system and be a self-advocate in the digital world, right? Because there is no way you can meet in person, right? So there is a lot of interesting challenges for us to kind of continue to nurture that growing environment for them. And also one thing to kind of note is that previously we all do the in-person training. It's very limited in terms of the, you know, the locations and geographic presence. With the 100% virtual, we are expanding the cohorts to really welcome, let's say, all the Americas, thinking about North America, Central America, and South Americas with a similar time zone. At the same time, also the countries, you know, from Africa are able to join such a big community, a virtual community, so that thinking about, you know, how they can continue to build that network and to do some of the cultural immersion, and at the same time to really exchange the learnings and have the support to each other. It is absolutely empowering experience in the virtual environment.
Great. Bruce, did you want to add to that?
You know, I'm just amazed at the whole idea of apprenticeship personally, and even in the COVID, the being primarily in the trades, they're kind of maybe a little autocratic, and they're probably very conservative as far as how they do their business. But they and the colleges bought Chromebooks for everybody. Everybody got a Chromebook. If you didn't have Wi-Fi or dependable Wi-Fi, they got them a hotspot, and they paid for that. And that was across the board. And with that, the innovation that came out of that from a technology perspective is they actually ended up with better tracking of the students and their performance than every other week, whatever they had their training courses. Some of them they're different, but they were able to track the progress they were able to report their hours. And it was just amazing. The other thing I really find interesting about apprenticeship is that is absolutely demand driven. Since most of them it's supported directly by industry, and so the two things are the outcomes are current and relevant, different than maybe community colleges, and the number of participants is demand driven based upon the opportunity, and so they don't train people that they don't need, and so I think both of those models I think could be relooked at from a career and technical education perspective across the whole spectrum, and I think those are my two takeaways right there.
That's great. It's really, really helpful to hear that. I want to actually pivot to, I have some other great questions lined up for all of you, but there's a great question that came through the chat, which is, what are some best practices for tending to apprentices' mental health, especially as many apprenticeship programs are now operating remotely on an intense learning timeline and still during a global pandemic? And, you know, I think, Chun, as you've communicated before, you're serving some people who may not fully feel comfortable in a digital environment, or maybe dealing with challenges at home. And, you know, Bruce, you talked about the compressed, you know, schedule. So it'd be great to hear each of you kind of chime in to how you're thinking about apprentices' mental health. I mean, certainly chocolate helps, Stefan. So, I mean, that helps me. It's got to be some sort of helpful piece as well. But if you could each chime in, that would be terrific.
Yeah, my observations were oftentimes we have committee meetings where perhaps discipline problems might be brought in, and I'm finding an uptick, a definite uptick, in folks that are coming in with emotional and distress situations that they don't have anywhere to turn to. They don't know how to they don't know how to communicate their concerns or their frustrations. And I've also noticed, I did talk about the culture of the trades, but I see more compassion on the side of the management or leadership of those apprentice programs, that before they were very judgmental. Now they're more conciliatory and they're trying to help. I think again, it's a big culture shift that is manifest by a external change to the environment. It's going to be great. It's going to be a great sociology study someday.
I can chime in a little bit on that as well. I totally agree with what Bruce has already mentioned. And for these apprentices, which is not different from other professionals in the pandemic, there are concerns about the lack of connections, right? Because it's a digital virtual world. And oftentimes the apprenticeship is very compressed, meaning it's a 4 to 6 months program. So technically there are tons of learnings in a very short period of time. In addition to the social economic challenges where we have experienced since pandemic, and plus countries vary, significant varies from 100% readiness in terms of virtual learning to the countries where people are still struggling with lack of electricity, internet connections, right? So we have to be very, very creative. Oftentimes I would say, let's not think about out of box. What if there is no box, right? So how we are going to truly think very creatively. So a couple of things what we do is we have daily check-in. We have daily check-in in the smaller breakout virtual rooms. As we talk about, you know, apprentices coming from different backgrounds, etc., we start with small, meaning a little bit more intimate daily check-in. Would be super helpful to say how they doing, you know, what's top of mind, is there anything distracting, what do you feel what do you feel the moment of when you are the best version of yourself, when do you feel you have the most joy going through the project, etc. So we will have those kind of daily check-in in a smaller setting. Another thing I feel very helpful is that we will do a lot of virtual kudos. Meaning, if one apprentice has has a live event on that day, let's say whether it's, you know, moving from one place to another place, or there is a celebrating a birthday, or they just finish up one technical milestones. Doing those kind of virtual kudos, a little celebration, it takes a long way. We also have, every Friday, we will have the team activities when the apprentices come together to join some of the team event. Chocolate definitely adds on the list. So thank you, Stefan. And we also, you know, invited different guest speakers from Microsoft to talk about what they have, what is their journey at Microsoft, you know, what they have overcome in their professional life, right? So those are some of the smaller activities definitely can help a lot. We also have the bi-weekly town hall meetings to have all these apprentices come together. We invited some of the experts from the mental health, mindfulness, going through some of the questions, and then also have them to do some exercise through mindfulness and etc. Definitely helped a lot. So those are a couple of things we do.
So many ideas are mentioned. So thanks, Bruce, and to Jun. So maybe one another aspect might be the working time, because in Germany we had, for example, families with 2, 3, 4 children, and they were also busy with homeschooling. So we have learned that we have to be more flexible, that our apprentice, when he stays at home, for example, doesn't keep a presentation from 2 to 3 p.m. Maybe we do it later or earlier. So that was a very important topic. And if we look into a potential new normal, then we speak currently about a Wi-Fi to go or what else. So that whenever we expect something, and in Germany this is defined in a special law, then we also, as an employer, have to offer the equipment for free to the apprentices. So now they get some special payments for the pandemic, also for using the private Wi-Fi during the pandemic and the lockdowns. But I believe we should forget this. There are some families, maybe they have not that much money for 250 Mbit line. And we also have to make sure that we are safe and secure connected with them. So there are so many topics what we can take into the future. We just have to make it happen.
Great, thank you all. And it sounds like some of those practices might continue on into the future. And again, I think this is a moment where some of these innovations will help us all be better at the workplace, regardless of whether you're an apprentice or not. I'm going to actually read another really terrific question that came through the chat. This one is, how did you modify your apprenticeship programs during the pandemic to ensure apprentices with disabilities were still able to participate? Does anyone want to chime in on that one?
So it was to me. Okay, I was waiting for the others to unmute the microphone.
Anyone.
Okay, and that's a good question. First, I know this is a very important topic in US, the disabilities, the discrimination, of course, in Germany as well. But we have to differentiate which kind of disability do they have. Do they have a cancer? Do they have some depression? So what else? So if they have a physical disability, of course, it was easier for them to stay in home office, for example. Nevertheless, of course, in Germany, there's also a big question, what do we do with the high performer and the low performer? Or what do we do with the people who are not that smart, perhaps, and they also shouldn't be lost in the landscape of education? So this is indeed a good question. I believe we have learned to find a way to reach all the apprentices, again, independent of the bank account of the parents, if they have a good equipment or not. So we have to offer them everything what we can do from employer side. And I believe that also helped for different kind of disabilities. So the question is having, what does it mean? But I believe that's very important, again, that we are responsible for the apprentices.
So do you take a very custom sort of one-on-one approach to what each apprentice needs then at Festo? Is it a very sort of specific approach for each apprentice with specific needs? You're on mute.
You as well. So, okay, sorry for that. You mean according to equipment, or okay?
Equipment, accommodations, yeah.
Yeah, but you can imagine we have a lot of mechanics, and normally they choose this way because they don't want to sit in the office and working with a computer the whole day. So for them it was very hard. We have learned to implement a new software, simulation, programming. They what I mentioned to create a automated process. So they made always also a teamwork, virtual teamwork at home, and then when we could go back to the training center, so they also could build up all the robot together with a mobile robots, for example, or a pick and play station. But again, we have to make sure they need they have the right hardware, what we have normally in the training center, but also to enable them for home office and for remote teaching. And we have learned also here important topics. Now we will reduce our equipment because we will in the future divide the group. We have, for example, 10 mechatronics. You know, some of them, they are at level 1 and some of them are at level 10. And that makes it very difficult for a teacher in a college as well as a trainer in a workshop. So we try to divide the group and let's make 2 levels. Yeah, and one group is present physically in the training center, and the others are online at home, make a simulation. We have a learning platform and what else. And in the next weeks we can change. And that also means we are ramping down some machines. We have 10, 15 machines too much aboard. We can transfer to the training center to Budapest. So hardware, equipment, what we need in the workshop, but also it's also personal equipment when we speak about headset, about laptops, Wi-Fi, and all the software topics, of course. And it was also exciting to see how quick the software providers adapted new solutions to enable us to have a global collaboration. This also was, I believe, an important step in that direction.
That's great. Chun and Bruce, do you have anything that you want to add to that question about people with disabilities and accommodations?
Thank you, Deanna. Directly from the apprenticeships, probably not. I don't have any anecdotal or direct information, simply because they go through a skills workshop or a boot camp generally before they're indentured, and so if they can't do the skills, they probably are not going to come out really high. But that said, there are some programs, particularly across the community colleges, directed towards uniquely able students, and those are students that are on the spectrum, autistic spectrum, that are being trained and have trained and very successfully migrated into the workforce for primarily in advanced manufacturing, because so many of those skills are rote skills and routine, and many of those students are very comfortable with that work environment and find that stimulating rather than boring. And so the uniquely enabled programs are very interesting, and there's some exploration as to how they can move that into other career pathways. So there is work being done. Unfortunately, in the trades, there are physical limitations to a lot of this work. So that as far as the physically people who might be physically handicapped or disabled, they probably don't even apply. But as far as some of the other disabilities or towards special populations, there is innovation going on, not necessarily because of COVID. Most of this was going on before, but I do find that intriguing, and those programs are very fulfilling for the people who participate in them.
Great, thank you. So I want to skip to another really interesting question from a participant, someone viewing. Now this was directed to Chun, so maybe Chun, you can speak first, but I think there's flexibility here for everyone to chime in. The question is about the development of professional networks within the company and the industry and across ecosystems. So this is something which, I mean, as we all know, right, our networks have tended to suffer a little bit in the pandemic. And this is critically important for apprentices. So Chun, how have you navigated this with your apprentices, helping them to develop their networks within Microsoft, outside of Microsoft? And then Stefan and Bruce, I would love to hear you sort of contribute to that as well, if you have something to offer.
Well, thank you for the great question. I actually monitoring some of the questions, wonderful questions. So for this one, a network connection and professional network is super, super critical, right? We, a couple of things we do. The first one is when they start the day one, they've already have a lined up of the individuals, professionals at Microsoft. We already kind of match them up with, given their background, given that the pathways they are getting to. For example, it's a software engineer or it's a technical PM. So we already lined up the mentors, the peer mentors and professional mentors in different ways, right? To start with the day one, so that they have on the Friday of that week, we will already have a meet and greet, virtual meet and greet, for them to have that bonding relationship to start with. One thing always needs to call out is that what I share with them is that I know all of you come here because you love Microsoft and you feel like we need you. We absolutely need you. We need you more than you think you are. So it's important to highlight their unique experiences. So when they interact with others, they continue to hold their identity, and knowing that what are the superpowers they have, and really stay curious, right? We talk about stay curious and stay positive, to ask questions. We provide a list of all we call it powerful questions, meaning how to do this icebreaker, right? How to think about asking the questions could be related to each other. And also think about mentorship. It's all about mentorship connection. It's all about two-way connections, right? Not necessarily meaning I wanted to just learn from that person. That person will learn a lot from that apprentice, right? So having that mindset definitely helps. Another thing we feel very helpful is how we are going to institutionalize it in terms of network. We are already baked into the different events and to kind of help them plug into the broader events. For example, let's say the different types of all hands meetings, different types of the activities, etc., which is part of their sponsoring team. Having these regular professional discussions and meetings would definitely help them a lot. Another thing also very important is that we have a big alumni community, virtual community through LinkedIn groups. So it's now expanding to almost like 800, etc. globally. So they are having this network, virtual network, to continues to have that conversations about, hey, can somebody show me, JavaScript of this, and how can somebody actually help me on that? From a technical questions to more the professional questions and personal questions, or where can I get my haircut, because I'm just relocated here, right? So there are just such a rich supporting mechanism definitely plays a big role. So I would love to hear from Stefan and Bruce.
Our approach is my approach is a little different. I don't do a lot of engagement with the students or the apprentices. I deal primarily with the administration and or the faculty. The role of the community colleges and California registered apprenticeships is that each of the apprenticeship programs has a lead education agency, which is a partner. It's required for registration. And the role of that partner is, one, to validate the eligibility or qualifications of the faculty, meet standards. Two is that the curriculum meets from a design perspective, has the rigor and will meet the desired outcomes that have been defined into the standards. And three is we act as a fiscal agent. So they really like us to come around because the state pays them for contact hours, much like in apportionment for regular students. The mechanism that I found most successful is faculty forums for instructors within a sector or within a trade occupational cluster. and we introduce those two industry partners who help identify gaps. But the role of that, the role of that faculty forum is towards a learning community, to where they talk about common problems, common challenges, best practices, and in my view, and I think the industrial partners' view, is to try and align the curriculum and outcomes of these related programs towards some common outcomes, and hopefully, where available, aligned with industry valued credentials that the industry then can weigh the value of that particular candidate. So those are the main things that come to mind on that point.
So from my standpoint, I'm connected within several circles. So I'm a member of the education community in our state. I am a member of innovation committee of a software developer in Germany. I'm in the innovation committee in north of China, for example. So it's less organized, I would say, like what Bruce have mentioned right now. How can we improve the system? I believe we should make some, from company side, we should make some initiatives to inform the government what do we need in the future. Now we speak about artificial intelligence, what means we need the data. We need camera systems, we need microphones, we need tools where we can analyze data, what we have in Excel, for example, that's a fundamental for all the AI applications. And next aspect in my understanding is the biomechatronics to avoid plastic waste, or there are some resources, for example, from fish waste to producing some plastic bags, what can be recycled after couples of weeks. And that's a total new topic in field of automation. And there we have to brief the government. What do we need? What does it mean for the teachers in the schools? What does it mean for the general education? How can we connect it? How do we get apprentices for these new topics? So this is how we can, how I try to promote and optimize the system and to build up a national and also global network.
Great. Thank you all so much for that. So we only have 2 minutes left. The conversation has moved so quickly. I know we could talk about this for hours. So I think I want to just do sort of a rapid fire close with each of you answering sort of a quick question. And the quick question is, like, what's the biggest lesson that we can draw from approaches in Germany or the US about apprenticeships during the pandemic that can help inform other work? So if you have just sort of one lesson that you'd like to share that was impactful for you, that you think could be impactful for greater sort of the greater apprenticeship community, I'd love to hear it. And anyone can jump in first.
I guess my first response would be the commonality of the challenges across training apprentices who are earn and learn work-based learning exercise and the normal academic or training programs. The challenges are very similar, and life gets in the way and all the other things. But I think that that they're looked at as two different entities within the training systems for folks, and I think that they're very similar. And one is, I think the apprenticeships are more agile. Which is colleges could definitely take a lesson from the agility and innovation that's directed from apprentices, because they are industry driven and demand driven rather than curriculum and institutional driven.
I would say the sky is the limit, right? Oftentimes I share with the apprentices, sky is the limit. If we don't set up the boundaries to ourselves, which is what we see in COVID-19, this is an opportunity. Although pandemic has presented so many challenges, but this is an opportunity. This is the opportunity for us to truly think differently about the way how we do the social learning, right? As Bruce mentioned, apprenticeship presents so much adaptability and agility in this process for us to create something as a global virtual platform that there is no physical boundaries, where apprentices can really hurdle together to be together, to connect together, and to grow together.
Okay, so a lot of things are said from my their point. I have learned, let's say, to create the future actively. Don't be like a consumer, be like a constructor, be like a designer. Be open and frankly for developments in field of the society, technological perspective. Teaching and learning is dominating the world. Really, for me, very impressive when I get a lot of ministers from different countries and ask about lessons learned, ask about how to train young people. And finally, I would say, please let's take care of the new generation, of the next generation.
Great. I want to thank you all so much for your time. Going into this, I knew that I would learn so much. I did, and I hope that our audience did too. I'm sure that they did. And audience, I'm so sorry that we didn't get a chance to answer all of your terrific questions. We'll do our very best to answer them after the event. So thank you all so much for joining us. Really, truly appreciate it. Best wishes, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.